men and women. You know, we often talk about the Coast Guard and General, we talk about all the time our great men and men.
March 15th, 2024, 6:47 a.m. Coral Gables, Florida. Federal agents surrounded the Mediterranean-style building on Ponce de Leon Boulevard. The brass plaque beside the entrance read Global Hope Foundation, serving communities worldwide since 2009. Inside, early morning staff arrived for what they believed would be another day of processing donations and coordinating relief shipments. They were wrong. At 7:02 a.m., ICE Homeland Security Investigations agents, accompanied by FBI financial crime specialists, executed simultaneous search warrants at the Foundation's headquarters and at 7 additional locations across Miami-Dade County. What they discovered in the next 14 hours would expose one of the largest charity fraud schemes in American history. The numbers were staggering. The deception was absolute. Behind the walls of humanitarian compassion operated a criminal enterprise that had systematically stolen from the most vulnerable populations on Earth. The discovery came by accident. And Psy Special Agent investigating a separate human smuggling operation noticed unusual financial transactions flowing through a Coral Gables nonprofit. Large cash deposits, frequent international wire transfers, patterns that didn't match typical charitable activity. The agent requested financial records. The Foundation's attorney provided heavily redacted documents and cited donor privacy concerns. That resistance triggered a deeper investigation. Federal prosecutors secured subpoenas. Bank records revealed the truth. Between January 2018 and March 2024, Global Hope Foundation reported receiving approximately $487 million in donations. Tax filings showed the organization distributed $412 million in humanitarian aid to disaster zones, refugee camps, and impoverished communities across 43 countries. The documentation was meticulous. The paperwork was pristine. The audits were clean. None of it was real. Forensic accountants discovered that actual charitable disbursements totaled less than $31 million over the 6-year period. The remaining $456 million had been systematically diverted through a network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and real estate purchases. Foundation executives had constructed an elaborate financial architecture designed to create the appearance of legitimate operations while funneling donations into personal accounts. The scheme's architect was Marcus Thornwell, a 52-year-old former investment banker who founded Global Hope Foundation after serving on the board of 2 legitimate international relief organizations. Thornwell understood nonprofit operations. He understood donor psychology. He understood exactly how to exploit the trust that accompanies humanitarian giving. His public persona was carefully curated. Thornwell appeared regularly on local television promoting disaster relief campaigns. He hosted fundraising galas attended by Miami's social elite. He published essays about effective altruism and the moral imperative of global citizenship. His LinkedIn profile featured photographs from refugee camps in Jordan, orphanages in Uganda, flood zones in Bangladesh. Federal investigators determined that Thornwell had visited exactly 3 international locations during his tenure as Foundation president. Each trip lasted fewer than 36 hours. Each trip was documented extensively on social media. Each trip generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in subsequent donations. The Foundation's operational model was sophisticated. Global Hope Foundation partnered with approximately 70 local NGOs and community organizations in developing nations. These partnerships were publicly announced with press releases describing collaborative efforts to address food insecurity, provide medical supplies, build schools, and support refugee resettlement. Investigators discovered that many of these partner organizations were entirely fictional. Others existed, but had never received any funding from Global Hope Foundation. Several real organizations confirmed they had been contacted by Thornwell's team, provided testimonials and impact reports for marketing materials, then never heard from the Foundation again. The deception extended to every level of operation. The evidence was overwhelming. When federal agents entered the Coral Gables headquarters that March morning, they discovered a sophisticated operation designed to maintain plausible legitimacy while concealing massive fraud. The foundation employed 47 people. Most were legitimate nonprofit professionals who believed they were working for a humanitarian organization. They processed donation receipts. They managed donor databases. They coordinated marketing campaigns and social media outreach. They had no idea their employer was criminal. Senior executives operated differently. Chief Financial Officer Patricia Drummond maintained 2 sets of financial records. One set documented the fictional charitable disbursements reported on tax filings. The second set tracked actual fund flows through the shell company network. Drummond stored these records in encrypted files on a personal laptop recovered from her Pinecrest residence. Director of International Programs James Kellerman created the fake NGO partnerships. Kellerman registered shell organizations in countries with minimal corporate oversight. He fabricated program reports complete with staged photographs, false testimony from supposed beneficiaries, and invented metrics demonstrating impact. These reports were professionally designed and distributed to major donors as proof of effective fund utilization. Marketing Director Elena Vasquez orchestrated the donor manipulation campaigns. Vasquez identified emotional triggers and crafted appeals that maximized giving. Crisis campaigns following natural disasters. Holiday-themed appeals featuring children. Medical emergency fundraisers with urgent deadlines. Each campaign was tested, refined, and deployed with calculated precision. The searches yielded extraordinary physical evidence. Agents discovered Thornwell maintained a private office behind a locked door marked archive storage. Inside were 3 floor safes containing approximately $8.2 million in cash stored in vacuum-sealed bags. A 4th safe held jewelry, watches, and collectible coins valued at approximately $1.9 million. Bank deposit receipts documented regular cash infusions totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars that Thornwell reported as anonymous donations on foundation records. At Thornwell's Coconut Grove mansion, agents found documents detailing the shell company structure. 17 corporations registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and Nevada. 23 offshore accounts in Belize, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. Purchase agreements for residential properties in Miami, Aspen, and Tuscany. Yacht registration documents. Private aviation membership receipts. The wealth was obscene. The betrayal was complete. The financial reconstruction revealed systematic theft. Federal forensic accountants spent 6 months tracing fund flows through the organization's complex corporate structure. Their findings documented a criminal operation of remarkable sophistication and breathtaking scope. Global Hope Foundation received donations through multiple channels: online giving platforms, direct mail campaigns, corporate partnerships, estate bequests, disaster relief appeals that generated surges of public generosity during humanitarian crises. Approximately 67% of donations came from individuals giving less than $500. These were ordinary Americans who believed they were helping earthquake victims in Haiti, supporting Syrian refugees, funding clean water projects in sub-Saharan Africa. Their cumulative contributions totaled more than $326 million over 6 years. Major donors contributed the remainder. Corporations seeking tax deductions and positive publicity. Private foundations making grant distributions. High net worth individuals drawn to Thornwell's compelling vision and apparent operational effectiveness. The foundation processed these donations through its legitimate business accounts. Then the diversion began. Shell companies submitted invoices for services that were never performed. Medical supply purchases, food shipments, construction materials, transportation costs. Each invoice was documented with purchase orders, shipping manifests, and delivery confirmations. All were fabricated. Foundation accounts transferred funds to pay these invoices. The shell companies immediately moved money to offshore accounts controlled by Thornwell and his senior executives. From offshore accounts, funds were transferred to personal investment accounts, used for real estate purchases, or converted to cash and physically transported back to the United States. The system was self-sustaining. As long as donations continued flowing in, The fraud could continue indefinitely. Thornwell and his team ensured donations continued flowing in by maintaining elaborate deception. The foundation's website featured live updates from supposed field operations, video testimonials from grateful beneficiaries, detailed annual reports with financial statements showing efficient fund utilization and minimal administrative overhead. Every element was false. Every claim was manufactured. The victims numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Federal prosecutors identified 647,000 individual donors who had contributed to Global Hope Foundation between 2018 and 2024. The average donation was approximately $450. These were teachers, nurses, retirees, small business owners, people who sacrificed their own resources to help others in desperate need. Their generosity was weaponized against them. Impact statements submitted during sentencing hearings revealed the emotional devastation. A retired school teacher from Ohio described how she had donated her late husband's life insurance proceeds to the foundation's Hurricane Relief Fund, believing she was honoring his memory by helping disaster survivors. A young couple from Wisconsin explained they had redirected funds they had been saving for their wedding to support the foundation's refugee assistance program. Each donor had made a conscious choice to prioritize others' needs over their own wants. That choice was betrayed. Corporate donors suffered reputational damage. A pharmaceutical company that had partnered with the Foundation for Medical Supply Distribution campaigns faced shareholder lawsuits alleging inadequate due diligence. A technology firm that had matched employee donations discovered its charitable giving program had unwittingly facilitated fraud. The actual victims, the people who should have received humanitarian assistance, remained invisible. How many lives could have been saved with $456 million in genuine aid? How many children could have been fed, educated, protected? The foundation's fictional beneficiaries would never receive help. The real beneficiaries were Thornwell and his co-conspirators who lived in luxury, purchased with stolen charity. The arrests came swiftly. On September 23, 2024, federal agents arrested Marcus Thornwell at his Coconut Grove residence. Simultaneous arrests targeted Patricia Drummond, James Kellerman, and Elena Vasquez. Each defendant was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud against the United States. Additional charges followed. Tax evasion, making false statements to federal investigators. Obstruction of justice. The indictment detailed 47 separate counts spanning 6 years of criminal activity. Thornwell pleaded not guilty. His attorneys argued that any financial irregularities resulted from accounting errors and mismanagement rather than criminal intent. They characterized their client as a dedicated humanitarian whose ambitious vision sometimes exceeded his administrative capabilities. Federal prosecutors presented the encrypted financial records, the offshore account documentation, the cash hidden in floor safes, the luxury asset purchases, the fabricated program reports. The evidence was incontrovertible. Facing overwhelming proof of guilt, Drummond, Kellerman, and Vasquez accepted plea agreements in exchange for cooperation and reduced sentences. Each provided detailed testimony documenting the fraud scheme's operations and Thornwell's central role in designing and directing the criminal enterprise. On February 8, 2025, a federal jury convicted Marcus Thornwell on all counts after deliberating for less than 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Sentencing delivered accountability. On May 12, 2025, U.S. District Judge Alexandra Mendez sentenced Marcus Thornwell to 28 years in federal prison. The sentence was one of the longest ever imposed for charity fraud in American history. Judge Mendez addressed Thornwell directly during sentencing. You exploited the fundamental human impulse toward compassion. You transformed generosity into a weapon. You stole not just money, but trust. Trust in charitable organizations. Trust in humanitarian work. Trust in our collective capacity to help those suffering across the world. The damage you have caused extends far beyond the dollar amounts detailed in the prosecution's exhibits. Patricia Drummond received a 12-year sentence. James Kellerman received 9 years. Elena Vasquez received 6 years. All defendants were ordered to pay restitution totaling $456 million. though prosecutors acknowledged that most diverted funds would never be recovered. Federal authorities seized approximately $127 million in assets, including real estate, investment accounts, and physical property. The U.S. Attorney's Office coordinated with legitimate international relief organizations to redirect recovered funds toward actual humanitarian programs in regions where Global Hope Foundation had claimed to operate. The investigation continued. Federal prosecutors announced additional indictments targeting the attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors who had facilitated the fraud scheme. Swiss banking authorities froze accounts linked to the conspiracy. Panamanian officials cooperated with asset forfeiture proceedings. The criminal enterprise was dismantled. But the damage persisted. The implications echo forward. The Global Hope Foundation case exposed systemic vulnerabilities in nonprofit oversight. The organization had maintained its tax-exempt status throughout its entire operation. The ears had never flagged any irregularities. Independent auditors had provided clean opinions on financial statements that documented entirely fictional charitable programs. The failure points were numerous. Regulatory gaps allowed sophisticated operators to maintain appearance of legitimacy while conducting massive fraud. Donor verification systems relied primarily on self-reporting by charitable organizations. International operations created jurisdictional complexities that made meaningful oversight nearly impossible. Congressional hearings followed the convictions. Nonprofit reform legislation was proposed, debated, stalled in committee. The charitable sector pushed back against increased regulation, arguing that additional oversight burdens would harm legitimate organizations and reduce the efficiency of humanitarian work. Meanwhile, donor confidence plummeted. A national survey conducted 6 months after the Thornwell verdict found that 43% of Americans who had previously donated to international relief organizations reported they would reduce or eliminate such giving due to concerns about fraud. The actual victims, those who desperately needed humanitarian assistance, paid the price for crimes committed by those who claimed to help them. That reality represents the deepest betrayal. Marcus Thornwell didn't just steal money. He weaponized compassion. He transformed the human impulse toward generosity into a vulnerability to exploit. He made cynicism rational. The warning remains urgent. Similar schemes continue operating today. Federal prosecutors estimate hundreds of fraudulent charitable organizations currently solicit donations across the United States. Many employ tactics pioneered by Thornwell: sophisticated marketing, emotional manipulation, carefully curated public personas backed by fabricated impact documentation. Protecting yourself requires vigilance. Verify charitable organizations through independent rating services. Examine detailed financial statements. Demand transparency about program operations. Ask specific questions about fund utilization and administrative costs. Be suspicious of organizations that resist providing detailed information about their work. Your generosity matters. Your compassion makes a difference. But that generosity must be protected through careful scrutiny of those who claim to channel it toward helping others. The Global Hope Foundation case demonstrates that fraud can operate at massive scale within plain sight when operators understand how to manipulate trust. The investigation shows that even sophisticated deception eventually leaves evidence trails that determined investigators can follow. But the case also reveals how much damage occurs before justice arrives. How many donors made sacrifices that were stolen rather than honored? How many people in genuine need went without assistance because resources were diverted to luxury purchases? Marcus Thornwell sits in federal prison. The criminal enterprise is destroyed. But the victims remain victimized. And somewhere, another fraud scheme is beginning, counting on your compassion, betting on your trust, preparing to transform generosity into theft. Remain vigilant. Demand accountability. Protect your compassion by directing it only toward those who will honor it. The most vulnerable people on earth depend on your generosity reaching them intact.